A project manager is the heart of a project. Today, we'll be unpacking that statement. I have a special guest by the name of Nobantu Radebe. She'll help us just dig a little deeper into the statement that I just made. Welcome, Nobantu. And please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you to your viewers also. And hello to them. So my name is Nobantu Radebe, like you mentioned, and I started my career in project management around 4 years ago, I think it was now. But fast forward before that, I come from an economics and accounting background. So I got my economics honors at Rose University, and straight after that I joined an IT organization as part of their graduate program. So I was like, this is an opportunity for me to go into the working space. The fact that it's in IT is just a means to an end. But I got in there. I was like, let me take full advantage of this opportunity. And in that, I think the program ran for a year. In that first year of my working and understanding what IT is about, I was consumed. I was absolutely consumed. The ideas around big data, around artificial intelligence, robotics, cyborg, anthropology, all of those things, I learned in my first year. And I was like, this is definitely the space I want to stay in. But because I didn't have any technical background, IT technical background, I was like, okay, I'm here now, but where do I fit in? All I know is economics. All I know is accounting, debits and credits. I don't think it works in this space. So project management lended itself very well to what I wanted to my introduction to tech and into technology, because I got an opportunity to go into a non-tech role, but still get a good understanding and a good grasp of what technology was and how do we deliver technology solutions to our clients. So so project management, I guess, found me, and that's basically been my journey since.
Awesome. I wonder though, Nobantu, do you ever wonder though, looking back, you said it's been 4 years, right? But do you ever wonder looking back? I mean, one would assume that with the BCom in accounting and financial economics, the thought process when you started initially anyway, your whole journey as study, you think that you'd have looked for a career more as an economist, as an auditor, as a financial manager in the future. Why stick to this particular field? What happened?
Yeah, so it wasn't the plan. Definitely was not the plan. So I think coming out of university, my goal was to go into consulting. I wanted to be a big shot consultant in some consulting hub, your Accentures, your Deloitte. I wanted to be there. And I thought, given this opportunity that I got to join this graduate program, it would be a stepping stone to kind of make my way into that space. So project management definitely wasn't the plan when I started out. But what I found was, actually looking back now retrospectively, a lot of the concepts and ideas that I learned in economics, which is about studying people's behaviors, studying scarcity. So economics is all centered around scarcity. You give something up to get something back. There's limited resources in terms of labor and natural resources that you have to make decisions and choices about. And how do you trade those to make sure that you get optimum? In economics, they call it utility, optimal utility or optimal benefit for either governments, individuals, or businesses. That's what economics is centered around. When I look back at those concepts and ideas and the role that I'm playing now as a project manager, it's so closely linked, because where economics has different constraints, like I mentioned, labor and natural resources, project management also has a set of constraints. Time, cost, and quality. Those are the three main constraints in project management. And my job is to make sure that I help stakeholders and businesses make choices around how do we balance these three constraints to deliver your maximal business utility. So in this case, that being a project. If your project is to roll out bunch of data centers to optimize your storage capacity. How do I do that as a project manager, managing those 3 resources and those constraints to do it in the most optimal way? So it's found, those concepts have found their way to me, but it definitely was not the plan going into it. It's helped, but yeah, it wasn't the plan.
So at least that wasn't wasted. All the concepts and ideas that you learned wasn't really something that
definitely. Yeah. All the concepts, all my parents' tuition fees, all the sponsorships.
I'm sure that
it wasn't wasted.
It wasn't all for nothing.
It wasn't. It wasn't all for nothing. Also, all the late nights and submissions, it wasn't for nothing.
Oh, awesome. Now take us through a day in the life of a project manager. What do you do?
So when you think about, at a high level, like I mentioned, project management is about using a methodology, using some tools and techniques that are quite prescriptive in their form to deliver projects. And that is at a high level what it involves. But at a more detailed level, there are certain knowledge areas, they call them, that you have to manage and interact with to make sure that you deliver that project correctly. So things like scope management, what is actually being delivered, what are the details of that, of whatever it is that is being delivered, being able to define that to the people that are impacted by that change and to your team it's a critical component. Understanding the cost of that delivery. So what is the budget that we have for this implementation? How do I split the budget across the implementation to make sure that the project is delivering value as we deliver it? That's another key component. Managing your resources. So whether that be your technical team that is actually doing the work and delivering the project, managing those people, but also managing your other resources like your material, whatever technology that is being used, whether there's licensing required, managing that is also part of what you do. So whatever resources are involved in making that project a success, you have to manage those and make sure that they're being used efficiently throughout the life cycle of the project. And then things like status reporting is another key component of what you do as a project manager on a day-to-day basis. You need to make sure that the stakeholders that have invested in the project know what's happening at every single point, where there are risks and issues that might impact your timeline, that might impact the delivery of your business objectives. You have to communicate those effectively and fluently to the people that matter and to the people that make the decisions. But also for your team, you need to communicate where we are and keep everyone accountable and manage their time according to the plan that you had initially set out. So all of those various components, scope management, cost management, resource management, are key knowledge areas that you on a day-to-day basis grapple with. And things that you work to make sure that your project ultimately is a success.
For someone that might be new to the field, Nobantu, let's break it down. Let's start up a new project. I want us to take it from the start of the project all the way to the closing off of the project. So we have a project A. Take me through that process. Where do you as a project manager get involved? And when you speak of resources, what are the resources? Because some other people might not be aware what those resources are. Take me through the resources and the scope, as well as the cost management, and who'd be in charge of that throughout the whole process. So we've just got a project, it's called Project A.
So let's say we've got a project A, and we have communication from the business or whoever your stakeholders are to say they want to kick off this project and they need a project manager. So the first thing you need to note is that a project, whether in the IT space, in the construction space, in health, wherever industry you're in, a project has 5 phases. So it has an initiation phase, it has a planning phase, it has an execution phase, it has a monitoring and control phase, and it has a closure phase. So all projects, wherever you are, wherever you find yourself as a project manager, they all have these 5 phases, and we refer to them as the project life cycle. So each project that you will encounter will go through these 5 phases. And different industries use different terminology to refer to them, but it's still the basic 5. So you would get a project A, and you'd have the first thing you'd have to do is take you through the initiation phase.
Okay.
And as a project manager, that's where you look at the feasibility of the project. So is it feasible to go ahead and implement this thing? Is it feasible to introduce this change in the business? And you would do that by gathering or putting together a business case with the relevant stakeholders that you're engaging with. And that business case would obviously include things like, what is your objective for this project? What is the cost, or what is the budget that you currently have available? And can you do it within a certain time frame? So if you have a time frame that is set, can you do this project in that given time frame? And all of those things would be contained in this business case.
On that point that you just raised, actually on the feasibility, I'm just interested because I'm just thinking about it. So you'd be doing this with the stakeholder, just seeing how feasible the implementing the project will be, right? Have there been cases where you can see that this project is actually, it would be worth not doing the project, but where the stakeholder is still just wanting to full steam ahead, still carry on, just because this is what they want done?
Definitely, yeah. So there definitely have been cases like that where you come into a project and they want to do a certain implementation, and usually the constraints there are time. So they usually want to carry out an implementation and have it delivered by X time. And you sit down as a project manager and you look at the scope. So the scope being the detail of the work that needs to be done. And you think to yourself, this is not doable. I think even your technical team would come around the table and say, this is not doable. Given the time that we have to implement this, it's not doable. And at that point, it's where stakeholder management as a skill becomes very important, because you have to go back to those people, the stakeholders making the decision, and say, given that it's not feasible for us to do it during this time, what are some of the things that you're willing to compromise? So if time if we can't compromise on time, you have to grapple with the fact that quality might be compromised on this project. So we'll deliver it in time, but it won't be to the quality that you expect. Or we'll deliver it in time, but from a costing perspective, it will take more. So we'll need to have more resources allocated to deliver the project within that quality, but within the given time. So that means getting more people to work on it, getting more technology on it, just plowing more onto the project. So then as a stakeholder, they get to make the decision, okay, am I willing to adjust the time frame and therefore allow the team to do what they have to do within the given budget, or is budget not a concern? Therefore, they can do it in time, I can pay whatever it takes, and they get it done within that time, and the quality still meets it. Or quality is not a concern, then we can just get a patched up project that gets implemented into the business for the sake of getting it up there. So there have been some times, and also there have been times where you are mid an implementation and a project, and the feasibility then becomes a concern because external changes come into the picture. So things like the pandemic, where you've got no control over it, and you have to go back and review the feasibility of the project, and it just becomes unreasonable, and you have to pull the plug on a project. So there have been cases like that. Few and far in between, but they do happen.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Cool. So that's where you'd start initiation, defining the business case, and as a project manager, you'd also then at this point put together your project charter. The project charter is like your project Bible. So everything that has to do with the project, the stakeholders, the budget, everything that is about the project is contained within the project charter. And at that end of that phase, you need to get buy-in from the project stakeholders or the project sponsors by getting sign-off on that charter. So when they sign it off, they tell you that they are fully committed to the project, and that you guys can go ahead with your resources and your team, go ahead full steam and implement against it. So that signature is very important from a project governance perspective. So that would be your step. And then once that, to make sure that you wrap up that initiation phase, we would then go through a project kickoff meeting. So this is where we get all of the people that are involved in the project around a table, or a virtual table in this case, and get them to understand that these are the objectives of the project, these are the team that's delivering it. All of those introduction and initial discussions around the project would happen at that kickoff meeting. And it's very important that you have this session, because it aligns what the project stakeholders think you are delivering, or what they want to be delivered, their requirements, this is what your team and your delivery team is able to deliver. So it's an alignment meeting to make sure that everyone is on the same page and everyone knows what's going to be delivered. So that would be your initiation phase and what you would do to kick off project A.
Yeah.
After that, you would go into planning. So planning then happens once you've gotten that sign off on your project charter. And what that would include is putting together your list of deliverables. So we use a term called WBS, which is a work breakdown structure. So it's a hierarchical list of what are the tasks and what are the deliverables that we are getting out of this project. So you would define that in a work breakdown structure. You would get your resources allocated and start planning when they start into the project from a timing perspective, and you start allocating your budget. So all of that initial planning, that's what you do within the planning phase, and that's what we do for project A. Make sure that we've got the budget, spread the budget out accordingly, get your resources, spread the resources out accordingly, and get your list of requirements and deliverables and spread that out accordingly according to the time frame that you have. So that would be the next step. And then once that is done, you would go into full execution mode. So when you start in the execution phase, this is where the rubber hits the road. Because you've got your plans, you've got your commitments in terms of your charter and your business case, but now it comes down to actually doing the work. And here, as a project manager, you go through your updates. So you would have periodic and regular updates with your stakeholders to give them an update of what are we actually working on as a team. As a project team, and also it gives you an opportunity to raise any risks or issues that you encounter as you go through the delivery of the project. So if there's anything, whether positive or negative, that's impacting your project timelines, you raise it in a formal meeting with them or in a formal communication with the stakeholders, and give them an opportunity to brainstorm and think about what are some of the mitigation actions we can put in place to minimize whatever risk or issue that we are encountering. So that would be part of the execution phase, managing risks, managing issues, but also providing then your progress updates on the project. So we've got a plan. Are we delivering according to that plan? Yes, no. What do we need to do to correct that? Those are all the activities that happen within your planning phase. And then the phase after that would be your monitoring and controlling phase. So monitoring and controlling speaks to what are the things that are happening in Project A that I need to be cognizant of and monitor. So using my progress matrix, and also what I need to control. So if quality starts slipping, what do I need to put in place to control the quality and make sure that we still meeting the set quality that we agreed with the stakeholder? If timing becomes a problem, what do I need to do to pull the time back to make sure that we're still meeting that? So those are all the activities that happen as part of that phase, but they happen in parallel with the execution phase. So you monitor and control everything that's happening from a progress perspective, but as part of your execution phase.
Okay, so the monitoring
those two
being
phases.
with the, sorry to cut you off. So the monitoring obviously being with the execution team, those sort of periodic meetings. Okay, cool.
Correct. You monitor those two in parallel, and then your final phase, once you're done with all of the execution and you've delivered your deliverables to set standard, would be to close. Closure would be your final phase. And in that phase, as a project manager, your role is to make sure that what was initially agreed on and what the deliverables are get signed off. So you put your stakeholders in a room, get them to sign those deliverables off. And then you get the right documentation in place to make sure that everyone is in alignment with what was delivered. And also in terms of any testing or criteria that's been met, you communicate that and you document that. And an important portion of that as well is collating all of the knowledge transfer documents that you have gathered throughout the implementation. So if you've implemented the project and there's any knowledge or skill that you need to hand over to the stakeholders so that they're able to run with the project, once you're done, you put that all together, get that gathered and finalized and hand that over in a formal process. So in that closure phase, basically, that's what you do. So if you were given Project A, those are the steps. Those are the steps that you need to follow to take it from initiation, where it's just an idea and people not sure what it is, to closure, where it's an actual living, breathing thing that people can use and derive the right value from in their business.
Thank you, Nobantu. That was so clear and coherent. In fact, I'm just thinking to myself, I could easily pass myself off as a project manager and be like, no, you see,
No, of course.
as you go through the initiation processes, that's how
Definitely.
yeah, that's how clear it was. So I mean, that was thanks for that. I wanted to ask you something though. While you were mentioning the budgeting and the costing and all those types of things and the progress matrices and all that, do you as a project manager when to meet the client's sort of requirements, do you sort of do the planning around what how much it will cost to implement a particular project, as well as how long it could possibly take? Then is there that back and forth between the client saying, Nobantu, could we not possibly decrease the pricing of this? And yet you can see that no, the resources actually will cost this when you look at the time that it will take to implement the project. So I wanted
Yeah.
to ask that balancing act between meeting those clients' expectations, but yet also keeping in mind that you're in a business, so it needs to be profitable when you're working on the project. So can you explain how you, because you also mentioned as well, and I love how all this is coming into what you had mentioned with the economics of it, which the whole opportunity cost, the whole thing
Yes.
beside
Yes.
those checks and balances. So take it away, Nobantu. Explain how you meet that balance and strike that balance between.
Yes. Yes. So in practice, it's only been a few projects where you are involved at proposal stage. It's almost
Yeah,
like pre-sale stage
yeah.
where the discussions around the cost
Mm-hmm.
and what it will take to implement this thing
Mm-hmm.
get put into the fore. And
Yeah,
in those experiences, your role is to remain as true as possible to what the client wants as you can. And
yeah,
by what the client wants, I mean the scope. So if the
yeah.
client wants a computer and they
Mm-hmm.
want a computer with all the bells and whistles, they
Mm-hmm.
want hard memory, they want all
Mm-hmm.
of the things that will take to make this computer as efficient as possible,
Yeah.
you need to keep that in the back of your mind as you go through the costing exercise.
Okay.
So if you know that your resources cost X,
Mm-hmm.
and all your other running costs
Mm-hmm.
basically of the project cost Y, you
Mm-hmm.
take that all into account and you go into those engagements and those discussions with the client with a
Yeah.
clear understanding of what that cost is,
Mm-hmm.
and what it will take to actually deliver it.
Okay.
And key to that is to remain as honest as possible also with the client
Mm-hmm.
what the cost will be, because then it gives them a good understanding of what it will take.
Mm-hmm.
And where you start getting pushback around, we don't actually have the budget for this,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the discussion around the scope then comes into play.
Oh, I
We
see.
want this.
I
Can we
see.
now remove probably the full spec around the storage, reduce it to a lesser storage so that you're able to get this computer still? It does what it has to do, but it doesn't have the breadth of the storage that you need. So then it starts becoming a negotiation. That's where your negotiation skills become quite important.
Mm-hmm.
And the client in most cases, actually 9 out of 10 cases, they also, because they run businesses and they also confronted with these constraints in their
Yeah.
own areas, they're
Mm-hmm.
able to negotiate with you and say, okay, I'll give up this to take this.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to a common understanding and a common ground.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, you also need to pull on some of the engagement. In our business, we call them client managers. So
Mm-hmm.
different businesses have different terms for it, but those
Yeah.
people who specialize in client relationship, those
Mm-hmm.
people become very important in those discussions, because you pull on their knowledge and their ability to persuade and engage with the client,
Yeah.
and use that, because they're also part of your team. You use
Yes.
those skills
Mm.
to negotiate and get to a point where the price is right for the client and the stakeholder, but
Yeah.
also you're not compromising the team and
Mm-hmm.
yourself as project manager in
Yeah.
terms of the scope. You can realistically deliver this,
Mm-hmm.
given the price that you've discussed with the client.
Awesome, awesome. And I think for
Yeah.
me, what actually the key point that I grabbed when you started talking was that one of scope. So that
Yeah.
means essentially you can drive the conversation to where you need it to go by talking scope. So if the stakeholder says really wants it cheap, then the scope as well. So you bring it to a point until the stakeholder is like, nah, okay, this is where we stop because the
This
scope
is where we stop.
less and we've got like a dodgy system or whatever is
Yeah.
being created. Okay.
Yes, it's a trade-off. It's
Mm.
a trade-off
Mm.
throughout
Huge trade-off.
the project.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, cool. So, Nobody, tell me, what are the challenges of being a project manager? Because I mean, we want to know.
Oh,
We want to be project managers, but now you need to tell us what can we do? What are the challenges?
oh my goodness. So it's different challenges on a different day,
Yeah,
to be honest.
yeah,
But I think the main challenges that remain consistent is
mm,
how do you communicate the right information at the
mm-hmm,
right time to the right
mm-hmm,
people?
yeah,
So at different phases of the project, you're interacting with different people. So at
yeah,
initiation phase, you might be interacting a lot with the people, with the key decision makers, and
yeah,
it's usually your C-suite, the CFO
mm-hmm,
who's financing the project, the
mm-hmm,
CEO who wants this project to kick off because it's strategic, it's a strategic need in the business,
mm,
an executive who's saying, I need this project so that my team can perform better. You're
yeah,
engaging with those kinds of people. And
mm,
how you speak to those people and articulate ideas to those people is very different to
yeah,
how you're going to be communicating to people who you're going to rely on in the execution phase, who probably are more concerned with the day-to-day running of whatever you're going to be doing or developing.
yeah,
So the people who are technical and
mm-hmm,
are involved in the day-to-day running
mm,
are very different to those C-suites.
mm,
So you have to tailor your message at every different phase to
yeah,
give the people that you're speaking to the right information and
yeah,
give it to them at that right time. So that becomes very challenging,
mm-hmm,
especially if you're not used to engaging with those different stakeholders and those different people.
okay,
So and sometimes they also pose different things. So you would go into a meeting, for example, with the CFO or CEO, and
mm-hmm,
have your presentation or your report, your project report set out,
mm-hmm,
and what you communicate to them will probably not be interesting. They're not interested in wanting to know how this thing technically fits in. They
mm,
just want to know, is it on time? Is it on budget? Are we getting the value? So you need to be concise and
mm,
precise in your communication with them to give them exactly what they want from that meeting. You might go into a meeting with a technical team
mm,
who are part of the stakeholders who
mm,
want to understand, okay, you've promised that you'll make this happen within
mm,
this budget. They don't actually care what the budget and an objective is, but they
mm,
want to know realistically what does the change mean for them? In my job, in my role, what
mm,
will this project look like? What do I have to change in what I do every day?
mm,
What technology do I need to learn? So you have to start thinking almost like a change manager to
mm,
them. You have to think, okay, if this change means your job is going to change in this way, how
mm-hmm,
do I make sure that you are equipped
yeah,
and know everything you need to know to do your job effectively when
yeah,
I leave as a project manager and my team leaves and
mm,
you are left with the solution and you have to grapple with it. So communication is a very big challenge,
mm,
and it's one that most project managers have to deal with on a consistent basis. But I think the next one would be managing conflict, because
yeah,
there's always conflict in projects, and it's
mm,
good conflict, bad conflict,
mm,
but you need to be able to understand how to manage the conflict well within
mm-hmm,
your team, specifically your delivery team,
mm,
so that it gets the best out of everyone. And as most people know, storming is a good component of a high performing team. So how do you get the team to storm well, and conflict well, so that it gets us to a resolution that has benefit for everyone
mm,
who's implementing, but also conflict with the client when it comes to things like, I want this new functionality, but I'm not willing to pay for it, or we've implemented this functionality, but the quality is poor.
mm,
How do I then go back to the client and start managing that conflict to say, I won't pay for this. The quality is not great, so
mm,
I'm not doing it. How do you manage that conflict? That becomes
mm,
a very difficult thing and a difficult challenge that you as a project manager have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's different with different projects, which I
mm.
guess makes it a blessing and a curse. It's exciting, but it's also a very big challenge.
Different project to project. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And each case is different. So I mean, I can imagine. So if you've been a project manager for 10 years, then it essentially means there's little that you don't know about businesses, because industries may change, but the principles will remain the same. So it's quite a
Yeah, yeah,
solid skill to have, I think. Could be.
definitely.
So Nobantu, we've mentioned the challenges, and you are teaching us how to become project managers, but now there must be
Yeah.
perks. So what are our perks here
Definitely.
when we get to that point? What are our perks? What are the benefits and advantages day to day and also future? The
Yeah.
future of being a project
Yeah.
manager. Mm,
I think there are a lot of advantages. The first one is
mm,
I mentioned to you at the start of our conversation that I got into project manager because I was
mm,
non-technical. I was
mhm.
saying to myself, I'm interested in technology
Yeah.
as an industry. I'm interested in all of those cool, world-changing, pie-in-the-sky ideas that I hear Google and Amazon and all those great organizations speak about. And I'm
Yes.
interested in how they work, but I've
Mm,
got no technical knowledge, no real technical knowledge on how to make it happen.
yeah.
So project management gives you the ability to be part of something like that without
Hmm.
having to know the nitty-gritties. So you need to make sure that you know the methodology, which
Hmm.
is how are we actually getting this done?
Yeah.
And you need to know how to manage your team and your resources and all of that, but you don't actually need to know the actual work. So
Yes.
it gives you almost like an audience view into
What's
the detail.
yeah.
Yes, without actually being expected to do any of it yourself. You're
Mm,
relying on a team
mm,
of subject matter experts to get it
mm,
out there,
mm.
but you are actually having front seat role into making it happen. So
That's,
you
that's,
actually learn so much
I can
just from
imagine.
sitting and watching how
Mm,
people do it, the code and the things
mm,
that I've learned have
mm,
been like priceless. And it's always like being in a lecture hall
mhm.
throughout your entire career. So it's a lot to learn, which
Yes.
is a great perk.
Mhm.
And what I also find is working with different people, because coming into an organization as well, coming from a non-technical background, like I said,
Mhm.
some people got assigned to a certain role. They
Mhm.
were like, okay, you're an engineer, you're going to sit into the engineering team, and that's what you do. But as
Mm.
a project manager, I get to work with people across the
Oh,
organization. I
nice,
get to work with
nice.
the sales team when
Mhm.
they do costing and proposals and all of that. I get to input into that process. I
Mm.
get to work with the technical team as they go through their implementation and actually deliver,
Mhm.
by seeing how they do it and all of that. And then I
Mm.
also get to work right at the end with the support team, where I hand over the solution to them and say, okay, this is what we've delivered, and
Mm.
this is what we'll take to support the solution going forward. And in between all of that, you're working with executive teams who are wanting to know, how is your project doing? What does it mean for our business? Are you meeting your timelines?
Mm.
Is it profitable? Are you within budget? So you get
Yeah.
to interact with those people, and
Mm.
then you also get to interact with the finance team, who want to know, from an invoicing perspective, are you invoicing on time? Are you managing your cash flow from? So you have a lot of discussions with different people across the business at different times. So
Mm.
that gives you, it makes you quite multifaceted as an individual. And from a career perspective, you start fine tuning yourself and understanding, where are my strengths
Mhm.
and how do I play my strengths as a project manager, possibly to even go out of project management and find yourself in a different space. So it gives you a good array of soft skills and hard skills to be able to navigate your career and tailor it to what you ultimately want to
Mm. Mm. Mm.
do.
So, in a nutshell, Nobantu, what I take away from what you've just said is, you are a working business, because essentially the skills you've mentioned, all the skills of, I'm just looking at it, I'm just
Yeah.
being practical about it, looking at all the skills that you've mentioned, all the way costing, all the way up to the implementation. You have that whole bird's eye view of what's happening from the start to the end, and that's business. So,
Yeah,
she's.
and I think it's such a core part, Jabulo, of what
Mm,
you are to a project. You are the captain of that ship, number one,
mhm,
which
mhm,
which my manager says all the time. But
mhm.
also you need to have that bird's eye view, because you need
Yeah.
to allow the people who fit into different positions to just focus on that component, because you then bring it all together and make
Mhm.
sure that it works cohesively as a solution, for the
Yeah.
duration of that specific project. Yeah.
Okay, Nobantu, I'm sold.